Graveyard, cemetery, burial ground. Whatever you call it, it holds the bodies of loved ones, soldiers, doctors, lawyers, nuns, and children. Elmwood Cemetery in Memphis, Tennessee houses all of these, including ones who have died from the worst plague seen in the United States, the yellow fever.
This story stresses the importance of Elmwood during its time. But to begin, we have to state the beginning of this vast cemetery.
Shelby County's oldest active cemetery is Elmwood Cemetery, which was established in 1852. There is a count of 70,000 bodies buried here, some infamous residents and veterans from every American war, even dating back from the Revolutionary War. Let us go back to before Elmwood had so many inhabitants and to when it just had one. The first person buried in the cemetery was Miss R.B. Berry, who was laid to rest on July 15, 1853. Her cause of death was not stated in the information given. Some people who are also put 6 feet under are about 1,000 Confederate soldiers. They lie in the Confederate Soldiers' Rest, which would be found in the Fowler section of the cemetery. A number of Union soldiers were also buried here, but they were moved to Memphis National Cemetery in 1868. Since there were horrific outbreaks of the yellow fever epidemic in Memphis in the 1870s, 2,500 of Memphis victims are buried in 4 sections of Elmwood. They include doctors, nuns, ministers, and even prostitutes who aided patients during the outbreak. Fun fact time! Did you know that the name for Elmwood was picked out of a hat? The irony of this is that the stockholders had to hurriedly order some elm trees from New York because Memphis has a plethora of oak trees, but not elms. Elmwood was originally 40 acres, but today it is a huge land mass of 80 acres. The property was increased after the Civil War, I guess a lot of people died or something, for $40,000.
A moist and wet day spreads out through the jungles of Africa. In some of the many dense trees and forests, there lie eggs. Because of the rain, the eggs begin to grow, and what we know as mosquitoes are born.
Fellow tradesmen and native Africans truncate the densely populated trees, causing numerous swarms of mosquitoes to venture out from their resting place.
Some of the mosquitoes would even bite people without knowing of the effects of such a bite. Native Africans began to notice a silence in the jungle. No birds were chirping, no monkeys were calling, no wind was blowing. Just an eerie silence. Little did they know that the yellow fever had just begun. Because Africa was part of the triangular trade route, it brought slaves over to America. As the many ships carrying African slaves rolled through the Atlantic, the virus continued to spread throughout their fresh bloodstream. Because of the lack of nutrition, poor living quarters, and the virus, many of the slaves never saw land. Their bodies had to be tossed overboard in ships.
During its time in the country, 500,000 people were inflicted and 100,000 people died, thus changing America forever.
In 1878, heroes roamed the streets of the corpse-stricken town. Not superheroes like Spider-Man, Superman, Wonder Woman, or Batman. Back in 1878, the heroes were nuns and doctors. It all started in August, back when Constance, Tekla, Frances, and Ruth came to Memphis to volunteer as nurses. Constance, born with the name Caroline Louise Darling, became head mistress at St. Mary's Episcopal School for Girls in the city of Memphis. When the women heard of the epidemic over summer break, they rushed back as soon as they could. When the sisters returned, the city was filled with chaos. Signs were posted on doors indicating that that home was suffering from the plague. With no cure, people were dying daily, even with care from nurses and doctors. Some of the symptoms patients had were severe headaches, severe pains, high fevers, jaundice, and black vomit. Nurses and doctors also had come down with the fever. Charles Parsons, Grace Episcopal Church's rector, came down with a fever and died only a week after contracting the disease. Days before, Constance and Tekla came down with the fever. Constance died 4 days later, and Tekla died only 3 days after her fellow nun. After Parsons' death, priests from all over the nation volunteered to take his place. The Reverend from Hoboken, New Jersey, Louis Schiller, got the job. Schiller got to Memphis sometime the same day the sisters died. 10 days after his arrival, Schiller died from yellow fever. In the plagued city, doctors too were contracting the deadly illness. A well-known physician, Dr. Will Armstrong, died 3 days after Schiller's death. When all was said and done, the death toll was stunning to everyone across the nation. 17,000 had contracted the illness, and 5,000 innocent lives were taken too soon. Today, Elmwood is home to many yellow fever victims. In Elmwood, there is an empty, treeless grassland called No Man's Land. It is home to 1,500 unidentified lives lost in the 1878 epidemic. Sisters Tekla, Constance, Ruth, and Frances are buried there as well. Their graves are in the shape of a cross. Today, people from all over come to visit the cemetery to witness just how many lives were diminished in the yellow fever epidemic.
The yellow fever swept the nation in a very prominent way, but as you can see, it touched many lives here in Memphis, Tennessee. Elmwood Cemetery is where a great majority of the victims of the yellow fever epidemic rest today.
Elmwood Cemetery is where a great majority of the victims of the yellow fever epidemic rest today. 2,500 of them lie on one of the 4 lots at Elmwood Cemetery. Amongst those 2,500 were nuns, doctors, ministers, and many more. Elmwood is where the historians and creators of Memphis lie today and have developed into Memphis' oldest active cemetery. Also being a garden, a tourist site, and a fun outing for the family, you could also call it a graveyard, a cemetery, or a burial ground.
Hey, Caitlin, you be with me.
No, we have to do this.
Okay, ready?
Awkward dance.
Alright. Okay, call me maybe. Hey, I just met you.
Yeah, ready?
Alright, set, go. Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe, and it's hard to look right at you, baby, so here's my number, so call me maybe. Hey, I just met you, and it's crazy. Two, ready, go. 1 Maca, 2 Maca, 3 Macarena, 4 Maca, 5 Maca, 6 Macarena, 7 Maca, 8 Maca, 9 Macarena, and Macarena. 5 Maca, 2 Maca, 3 Macarena, 5 Macarena, 7 Macarena, and Macarena. Oh. Hi to the camera. Somebody say hi.